You know what? We can start out by saying cheers.
Yes, cheers.
Cheers, everyone, for getting into the festival.
Cheers.
Yes.
All right.
Didn't even get
And
myself a
congratulations on your films.
And I'm
We're so happy, that you are here. We wish you could be here. We keep saying that. Can't be here.
It's your banner.
We have our wonderful moderator, Dale, who is a filmmaker as well. And she'd probably talk about her film too, but she asks great questions and I'm going to let her take over.
Thank you, Diana. All right, so we're going to just go ahead and start rolling. One of the things about doing a recording that I noticed when we recorded the other one is that when I ask you a question, and I'm going to ask you a first question, everybody, that you make sure and say your name and the name of your film before you answer the question, so that in the recording afterwards, which may go on YouTube or whatever, that people know. So yes.
I forgot to introduce Janice. She's on with us. She's our executive director, Janice Miller. Wave.
Janice, hello. Yes, I called them the fearless leaders last time, and
we were the fearless leaders.
Yeah, and I'm going to keep up that tradition. I that's who you are in my mind, the fearless leaders.
And I think we lost her though. It looked like she was in the car, and now
just like all of a sudden she disappeared. I don't know what happened.
Yeah, she'll probably come and go. And also, we just had Nate join us. So Austin, you lied.
I thought he was coming, but
he is coming.
There he is.
I thought you actually said I don't think. No, that was Ariana who said her other person is not coming. So we now have Nate on board, who is our producer and acted in How to Plan a Heist. So the way we did this for the last chat is that we have everyone at this moment mute yourselves. And June, welcome. June, we just saw you come on. So glad you were able to get the link again and get on. Yes, and June is the producer of Liberation Heroes. So hello. So I'm a fellow filmmaker, but I was explaining to Diana that I'm also a writing teacher. And so I kind of just really enjoy working with creative people. So this is why I volunteered to do this when they needed a host to take the place of the person they originally had. So here I am. So everyone has muted. Excellent. And I'm going to ask a first question, which is the standard first question you guys are probably all really used to. And that is, and again, make sure to say your name, say your film, and then tell us first a little brief, like a one sentence, what your film is about. And then please tell us what inspired you to make this film in whatever capacity that you're in. So I'm going to just go in the order. I will link people together though, but other than that, I'm going to go in the order of what I see. And right now I see Austin. So we're going to link you, Austin, unmute, and we'll link you with Nate. So Nate, please unmute. There you go. And I'm going to, that's the question. So go ahead and whoever wants to start.
I'll start. My name is Austin Simmons. I'm the writer, director, and editor of How to Plan a Heist. The film is really just a short comedy spoof on heist films about a group of people coming together to try to plan a heist, but one of them has had to bring their children because they couldn't find a babysitter, their toddlers. So it's all about them trying to plan this very elaborate heist while also trying to keep toddlers entertained. The inspiration from it honestly came from me and Nate trying to think of a short film to do together. We had done one before, and this was our second one. And Nate had to bring his children every time we were trying to plan these short films. And we realized that it was very hard to get creative and to figure something out while trying to keep his children entertained. We would often take them to the park or walk around as they were spilling food everywhere. And I remember Nate telling me that he really wanted to do a heist film. And I was like, all right, I'm just gonna bang my head up against the wall and try to figure it out. And then I just kind of came up with the idea of, I'm like, why don't we just do what we know? And we're just going to do a heist film about us trying to plan this script. And that's kind of how it just came together.
Oh, that was great. And Nate, you want to add to that?
No, that's everything.
That was perfect. Did you play the dad in it of the two kids? Which part did you play? Because Nate,
I'm the dad. Yeah, those are
the dad. That's what I thought, but not
those are his actual children in the film too.
Oh,
Yeah.
Are they twin girls?
Identical twin 3-year-olds.
Yeah, I'm a twin, but I have a twin brother, so that's a whole other thing. So, so that was cool, and I had to say to everyone, I watched all of your films because I feel like I shouldn't do this unless I've seen your work. Luckily, I'd seen the Book of Ruth before. So, and I encourage you to do the same. Every single film in this group of people is fantastic. I laughed out loud over and over again at How to Plan a Heist. It is hilarious. I mean, it's just, and what I loved was when the music goes, every time they started to plan a heist again, and then suddenly it stopped as the children were crying, and then, at any rate, I loved it.
Thank you.
So that's excellent. So go ahead and mute yourselves again if you haven't. And Chen, let us talk to you, darling.
Hi guys, my name is Chen Drachman. I am the executive producer, writer, and also cast member on the Book of Ruth. One sentence about the Book of Ruth, impossible to do without spoilers. So I'll say basically,
we do spoilers here. We just let people.
Yeah, we have no choice.
Yeah,
so basically, it's the story centers around an older version of Anne Frank who survived the Holocaust without anyone knowing, and we're finding her at a point of her life years later. She's a grandmother. Her family comes over. There's a news piece on TV that kind of discusses the death of Anne Frank, and that kind of launches the granddaughter to confront her about it because she suspected for years and it was never confirmed. They never spoke about it. So that's kind of like, you know, the one sentence version. And as for inspiration, we actually put the inspiration in the movie because back in 2015, the Anne Frank House in Amsterdam released a new study about the date of her death. People don't realize, but the Anne Frank House keeps releasing studies all the time. Every year, every other year, there's like some new information. And that specific study was talking about the fact that she actually died in a date that was earlier than originally estimated. It's because the new eyewitnesses came forward and talked about the progression of her disease. So it was summarized that basically she died earlier. But there was this one media outlet that reported about this study. And when they made like some sort of like a punctuation error, they just put the comma in the wrong place. And it made it sound like nobody knew what happened to her. Kind of like opening this like what if scenario in my head. And then I was asking myself, what if she was alive today? In what circumstances would we not know? In what circumstances would she won't want the world to know? So from the place of like trying to answer these questions, the story came to be, and we get to meet her, and she talks all about memory, about the greater good, the symbolism. Like sometimes the importance of symbolism is just keep things as they are. If she had come forward, it might have, you know, ruined something that is very necessary for the world. So yeah, that's our movie.
And you just like answered the question I had already jotted down that I was going to ask you. So I'm going to have to come up with something else now. At any rate,
Well, I'm sorry, it's part of the inspiration, but yeah.
No, it is. It totally is. And again, it's just watching it. When I watched it the first time, it was like, oh my God, you know, it's Anne Frank. I mean, you know, and when you realize that moment in the film, it's just wonderful. It's such a great example of a what if. And for the screenwriters here, and I think we have at least 3 or 4 screenwriters here, you know, starting off with those what ifs are just so powerful. And so it's a wonderful, wonderful piece. All right, let us look at James. Talk to us about the AMR story.
Yeah, hey everyone, I'm James West. I'm the producer, filmer, a bit of everything really for the AMR story. Well, the film in one sentence is, it's really group of guys that work together in Breckenridge. They still work together in Breckenridge, that just live every day of the winter season as complete ski bums. That's what they're there to do, and that's why they're in Breckenridge. The inspiration for it really kind of came about. I'd been to Breckenridge a few times skiing, and I hadn't been into the shop before until I'd met Garrett, who was in the film. And I set foot in the shop, and it's like going back in time to the days of Warren Miller when he first started doing ski films. And in fact, Warren Miller just recently premiered this year his biography. They did a bio about him. And I'd seen that in Breckenridge, and I thought to myself, actually, I think I might have something here with the guys at AMR. So literally got together with them, started hanging out in the shop a lot more, and was just absolutely inspired by the people that they are. You know, it's really quite heartwarming going in there, because they're all about getting each other's backs, and it's kind of hard to explain. I still almost don't know what I produced almost sometimes, but I think it is really, really nice just to this day still have shops like AMR around. It's not corporate business or anything like that. It's a very, very small local business that is just about keeping the stoke of skiing alive and not about making money at all.
Absolutely.
So,
it was really inspiring, and it really also caught the whole zeitgeist of Breckenridge, you know, and of the community, a community of skiers to begin with. And so now you are clearly from the UK. So do you live there, or?
I'm from New Zealand.
Oh, you're New Zealand. I'm not hearing. That's so funny, because I can usually distinguish the two accents. But yours is sounding more British than New Zealand to me right now.
Oh,
you're a New Zealander.
Don't tell my parents that.
Okay, I won't tell them that. I promise. So are you living in New Zealand currently, or are you in the States?
Well, actually, no, you're right. I am living in the UK right now. But I'm actually going back to New Zealand in about 10 days' time to work on the America's Cup, which is the yacht race. I don't know if any of you have seen the America's Cup.
You do?
Yeah, so I'm going back to work for the America's Cup as their social media producer, so producing content on their social channels. So it'll be an intense 5 months, but and I'll miss out, unfortunately, on the season to come. But you know, I think with everything going on, it's a little unfortunate. It's going to be a very different year. So,
indeed. Well, I need an email from you. If your parents say that you've acquired a more British accent, I want you writing me and telling me that. So.
Well, I think my mum would be happy about that, because she's British, so but I'm born and bred Kiwi, so yeah.
Okay, very, very good. And yes, it was a lovely film. I come from skiing, but I'm not a fanatic, so but I understand that mindset.
Awesome.
Ariana, I'm so pleased that I was able to see your film. Would those in our group, because it's geo-blocked, and so that was causing a problem, has anyone else in our group seen the film? If you have, raise your hand. Well, I think that's been a problem. I don't know, Diana, whether, you know, there's ways to, you know, maybe again, see who it is that's geo-blocking it, or, you know, any rate, it is beyond worth seeing. It's, to me, it should be required viewing, is how I felt about it. It's, so tell us about it. I'm not going to, beyond that, I'm going to let you tell us about it and what inspired you.
Yeah, so my name is Ariana Muniz, and I'm a cinematographer currently getting my bachelor's degree in film and television. And my film is called Tipsy Talk, A Place and Time to Twerk. It originally started off as a web series episode, so a narrative about two young African-American women going out to a club to basically try and have a good night, and they're denied access because of the color of their skin, basically because of who they are. They end up getting upset, and then going on a walk, just talking through it basically with each other, about what they would do, what they want to do, what they want to say. And about halfway through production, we get shut down. And it ends up turning into a documentary because of a few things that we experienced on set. Our actresses they were called many things, many derogatory things. They were said, there was people yelling out of their apartments at our actresses, saying that they couldn't afford to live in the neighborhood that we were in. We were having trouble basically from the get-go of production. And so we decided to turn it into a documentary about our experiences on set, what our actresses went through, and basically how they felt about everything. And it was pretty hard for all of us to experience it, especially for me as a Latina. I have experienced it in my life as well, especially sometimes just being based off my name. I've been denied like work and everything. So it was hard for a lot of us to deal with. And it kind of inspired the director to turn it into something that people, would create awareness basically for everybody. She graduated this past semester, but she's going on to bigger and better things for sure. And she had a very rough time. She's also African American, and she had a hard time continuing on through the production, as well as the actresses. They had to take breaks and had to calm down. One of them eventually ended up crying. It was because of the lines as well. Their lines really connected with the experiences they had just gone through. So it was pretty difficult. And that's kind of what inspired us to get interviews, get the behind the scenes footage, and kind of turn it into, this is actually what happened halfway through production. And we ended up stopping eventually because of the rain. We got rained out. But that's basically what happened. It's intense.
It was amazing to watch. And the director was also the writer, am I correct?
Yes, she ended up taking over that script, I believe, from someone else as the director. She wrote it, and she wasn't going to direct it originally, and then she decided that she was going to fight for it, so she did, and she got it. And it ended up being really great. We were just upset we couldn't finish it.
And her intention was to direct the episode, the narrative episode. Correct. And of course, everything else happened. I would argue that the everything else that happened made for such an incredibly powerful cautionary tale. And my favorite part, to all the rest of us who are white, was the part where one of the actresses in the end said, you who are not African American need to go to your own communities, and you need to talk to them about racism, because we cannot do it for you. And I thought that was so powerful, but it was heartbreaking. I have to say to everybody, there was a scene where they go back to filming after this woman was yelling at them and saying, you don't belong in this neighborhood type of thing. She doesn't even know who they are. She doesn't know that they're she's just yelling at them because they're Black. They go back to filming, and a car, and I'm going to spoil her, but a car drives by and somebody yells out the N-word, like F you, and then the N-word, and screeches away. These are two women who are students at a university who are filming something, and this is what happens. And the other line that struck me was when she said, when we talk about microaggressions and any other form of aggressions, and any of you ask us about it, we're always underestimating it. We're always downplaying it. We're always saying it's not as bad as it is. And those two things really struck home for me. So it's a powerful film, and I applaud you for being involved.
It was hard going through it, especially, catching some of that on the actual camera within the shots. It was hard for me to hear them go through that and then watch them have to go, back into acting and have to deal with it in their lines, and then have to, act instead of actually going, full on. So
my story is also about racism, and I'll talk about it in a moment, but sometimes I even felt terrible making my actors go through some of the auditions. and even had this kind of feeling like, here I am, you know, an older white woman, uh, talking about the story. I mean, it's biracial, so, you know, there is both aspects, but, and asking these young actors to deal with these kinds of encounters. And yeah, it's terrible. Any rate, yes, thank you for it. And again, I actually do think everybody who thinks there's no such thing as micro and macro aggressions need to watch that, because it's great.
And
All
for
right.
anyone else who thinks that it doesn't exist, it
Yes.
does. We experienced it in person. So
Well, and that's why it was so powerful. Actually, that is why. Mark, I have you here, and your film was so fascinating. So you are the cinema director, cinematographer, and editor. Those are the only hats I've written down so far for Morfar's View of the Wind. So talk to us.
Yeah, and my wife was the producer, so we're pretty much a two-person band. Is that how you say it?
Yeah.
Yeah, Morfar's View of the Winds, I guess to sum it up, is we documented the final expedition of about a 7-year process where an aging photographer has been determined to find the exact rock within the Rocky Mountains where the first illustration was created, published illustration, I guess. And so a bit of a bizarre premise. I think originally when he told me about it, Morfar, the main character, I almost, thought it was like, I didn't understand it because, why would you want to find one specific rock within the Rocky Mountains? And then the more he kind of opened up into how much knowledge he knows about it, it's the most important rock in so many ways. I mean, because the artists that drew those maps led to the maps that were used for, the Oregon Trail, the Mormon Trail, the California Gold Rush, Fremont's presidential run, which was unsuccessful. But then there's a really interesting book where they draw some parallels and they lead to Abraham Lincoln's successful presidential run. So all of these moments in history that can be tied back to this one rock. And then Morfar is just a national treasure of a person. He's so inspirational. And the fact that like he said he was going to go in and do this and he was 80 and I was 31, I just couldn't not go. I couldn't pass up that opportunity.
That's wonderful. And just to make sure people on the recording here, you are Mark Pedri. Your last name is Pedri, and I just want to emphasize your full name.
Yeah, sorry about that.
No worries. Diane, I just want to make sure when you guys recorded, I noticed that it was just everyone in their own single square. I don't know if I need to put it on speaker view for that to happen. I've just switched to speaker view just in case, but I'll let you figure that out when you get my recording. And so that leaves only one person who, again, has an incredibly powerful film, and that is June, who is the producer of Liberation Heroes. I'm just going to let you tell us about it, June.
Basically, the film focuses...
Your full name, please. I'm sorry to be fussy.
June Beeler, producer of Liberation Heroes, and I'm really glad to be here. Hi, everybody. On behalf of my producing partner, me and my producing partner, Andy Friendly, whose father actually is Fred Friendly, who is a CBS News pioneer and was the partner of Edward R. Murrow. So the film has an interesting legacy, and Murrow was featured in the film as well, and our director, Vanessa Roth. And the film focuses on the journeys of liberators and liberation witnesses. And the reason, I'll just say very quickly, the reason there's a distinction, which is something that is sort of frustrating and something that we're kind of trying to address, is that the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum has given a designation that a liberator is someone who was at the camps during a certain period of time. But the reality is there are many liberators from many different walks of life, including African Americans and Japanese Asian Americans who were part of liberation. So we sort of explore that in the film. So basically, it's what happens in the film is we follow their journeys and we start to see stark parallels between the past and present. And I think even this week we're seeing that going on. And what's the inspiration was is to give these women and men a platform in current day, because what's astounding is that all these many years later, we're still dealing with a lot of the same issues. And it's just, you start seeing these stark parallels between Hitler, between current day, between the failure of the press, between what did we know and what did we not know, what happens under our watch. It brings up all these subjects. We were trying to come at this from a point of view that was unique, because I feel like the World War II story has been so told, but it's just astounding how you can, you know, it really was an interesting experience for all of us who've done a lot of these kinds of films, but looking at it from a little bit of a different point of view. So, and the testimonies are, many of the testimonies we used are part of a larger collection from USC Shoah Foundation, which was the organization founded by Steven Spielberg after his experiences filming Schindler's List, to allow Holocaust and genocide survivors to be educators for future generations. So we use these testimonies from the 90s, and then we have some new testimonies, including our wonderful Alan Moskin and Virgil Westdale, who's 103, and some great people.
Yeah, I remember when I was watching it, it was like going, well, this batch of people look like they're way too young to have been liberators, and this batch in their 90s, you know, and the 100-plus-year-old. Well, that makes sense. So I was really glad to hear that it was that you had pulled from those 90s archives, and that's why we were able to get those fuller stories of all these folks. It was really quite amazing. I will quickly mention that my own father flew reconnaissance in World War II over Hiroshima after the bomb had been dropped. He did not know what he was surveying, because it didn't look any different than the firebombs. The destruction of the firebombs was so stunning that that for him, he just assumed that, you know, I think they were taking photographs or whatever it is that they do in reconnaissance, that he was assuming it was firebombed and not aware that he was flying over, you know, the first bomb dropped. So H-bomb. So at any rate, yeah, these are amazing stories, and we don't want to lose them.
And I think one of the things, I think for me, one of the most powerful moments in the film is when William Levine, who was a very revered, became a general, talks about the fact that he never, in 50 years, never told his wife what he experienced.
I know.
Just, I think, regretted that, but just the way he opens up and talks about that is
so, it's so touching, and it's actually one of the questions I wrote down for myself that I'm going to ask you a little bit further about, because I just found that so intriguing. For the last chat I did, I forgot to talk about my film, so I'm not going to forget this time. I will talk about my film, which is called Entwined, and it's part of, oh, I should know the name, Diana, for shame. I'm like going, what's the name of my, it's one of the shorts about relationships and love and so forth. I can't remember the total name, but you can look it up if you want to see it. It is a story about a man and a woman who are standing in front of the same painting at an art gallery. They are both in their 60s, mid to late 60s, and he's black and she's white. And after a moment, they look at each other and realize that they know each other from almost 50 years ago, when they had been boyfriend and girlfriend in high school before these racist bullies scared them apart. And so this is the first time they've seen each other in all this time. She's married, he's widowed, and it's about reconciling with that past and about the fact that there are still feelings. This was not, you know, a transitory love affair. It was true love, and yet they were ripped apart. And so how now, all these years later, making other life choices than they would have, you know, how are they feeling? So that's kind of what that story is about. And I'm the writer, director, and producer of that. Okay, so thank you. So I've got a few questions, and Diana, give me a thumbs up if you want me to ask those same 2 questions that you had asked me to ask with the other group. Great. Okay, so I'll make sure and do that as well. So my first question is, I have a single question to each person, and for Morfar. So what I found interesting about that, Mark, was his obsessive nature. So I'd love for you to talk about that obsession that you observed in the man, how it drove him. And I actually found I wrote down 2 more brief questions, one of which was the meaning of the title, which I'm assuming is related to Morfar, meaning, you know, grandfather, and the winds being the name of the rivers. So I think I got that. But I was very, very touched by how family ends up, it's not just a story about a man's obsession and the discovery of this important historical location. It's a story about family. And so maybe start there with how it's a story about family, and then you can touch on the character and his nature if you'd like.
Sure. Yeah. I actually think they're kind of interconnected, which is interesting. But yeah, so as the story, I guess, on screen evolves exactly in the way that it happened in reality. We were in Los Angeles flying out to follow him on the final expedition. And it was like 2 nights before meeting him in the mountains. He posted on Facebook that his oxygen was way too low to go. So we also found out on Facebook, just like his granddaughter and daughter, who had happened to be visiting from Norway. So Morfar's name is Conrad Smith, but in Norwegian, grandpa is mother, father. So Morfar is the translation.
Yes.
So as soon as we realized that he was no longer going on the trip, but his granddaughter and mother were, and they just kept referring to him as Morfar. So that's where the title comes from there. And then the original drawing was called A View of the Winds. And they're referring to the Wind River Mountains within the Rocky Mountain Range. So we thought that, you know, Morfar's View of the Winds was, you know, a play on the original drawing, and we wanted to kind of have a little bit of an Easter egg in there. But the idea of family was really interesting because his family, you know, he's 80 years old. I think at that age, you know, even minor health setbacks can be, you know, you just don't know where it's going to go. So his family came out from Norway to see him, you know, for the summertime and check in on him generally, just because they do, even though they live so far apart, they Skype every week and they're still a big part of his life. He posts on Facebook about him all the time. And he's 80. I have to keep reminding people that he's 80. He's much more technologically savvy than me. And
Incredibly.
so then when they came here and found out that he couldn't go on this journey, it was still a version of them, you know, caring so much about him and realizing that this means so much to him that, you know, it means more to him that they come to visit him and then go on this journey in the mountains by themselves than just to be like, okay, well, I guess we can't go, so we'll just hang out at your house anyway, since we're here. So that was really neat to see. And the obsession angle comes in. The film actually opens with a line where he says, "Obsession is good." And it really, that kind of carries through because it keeps coming back to the fact that, you know, even if it's this obsession that nobody thinks is important, you know, maybe it is just a rock in the Rocky Mountains, but so much good has come out of this obsession with this rock. I mean, it's brought his family closer to him. They got to go on this amazing journey. It brought us closer to him. And now it allowed us to tell a story that, I guess, on a larger scale is about continuing to explore the world when everything seems to be, you know, discovered. Like, how many expeditions can you really go on? It's not like Lewis and Clark. So Morfar, I guess his obsession with this rock just reminds us that there's an infinite amount of expeditions and every person has a new perspective, and, you know, their view of the winds is going to be different than John Fremont. Just because he was the first one, it doesn't mean that it's any less valid. So I think obsession is good.
Yeah, I agree. And I think probably everyone here on this chat is obsessed in one way or another. So, you know, I don't.
Can I ask Mark a question?
Yes, of course.
You said earlier that this is the final expedition. Is it though? Do we know at this point?
Well, so that, I guess,
Yes,
I'll share some information about Morfar.
Yeah.
We were thinking about adding it to the end of the film, but it happened like 2 weeks ago, so it wouldn't have worked. But he successfully went in on horseback this year and climbed the mountain and sat on the rock.
Yay! That's so great. I mean, when you see the end of the film, everybody, you'll understand, because he said that's what he was planning to do. He was hoping to do. So he's, how cool is that? And his oxygen levels were okay?
Yeah, he took in some precautionary devices and whatnot, and he ended up riding the horse in and then felt good enough to walk the entire way out. So
wow,
he wasn't really
good for him.
To beat, yeah.
That's lovely. So for Book of Ruth, as long as you're unmuted, Ken, we can talk to you about that. You certainly talked about many of these aspects, but my question is related to what you talked about, and that is this idea when everybody knows your name and everybody knows your story, but you want to live beyond that story while still keeping the story intact. I felt that that was one of the themes at the heart of your film, and how she also demands for herself a private life, that just because she is this symbol of something should not deny her a private life. Do you agree with those kind of assessments? And if you could talk further about that.
Yeah, I mean, I found that for some reason, and I really don't know the psychology for me behind it, I touch on the dark side of fame a lot in things that I write. I think for many artists, fame is a byproduct of doing what they love, but it's not something they seek. It comes with a lot of, oh, I can't ride the subway anymore. I can't go into a Starbucks anymore. For her, the book was published after she died. I had, for myself, had to think on a whole background of in what situation she maybe did not reunite with her father in time after the war to tell him to not do it, to not publish the book.
Right.
But the truth is, and I talked to Tova, our star, a lot about it too, because the truth is we don't know who she would have been today. She may have embraced it completely and become an activist and a public speaker and talk a lot about racism and stuff. As a kid, she wanted to become an author, so you'd say maybe she would find this as a blessing. But at the same time, and this is something we say in the dialogue, I believe, unless we cut it and I forgot. The book, the diary, is a recount of what ended up being the worst time of her life, or something that led into the worst time of her family's life, to the end of her family's life. So maybe the Anne Frank that would have come out of this trauma would not want the same things that the Anne Frank in the hideout would want. And I think, again, trauma, it's like June said, people react so differently to trauma. I'm third generation. My grandpa would not talk about the Holocaust. He was in Auschwitz. He would not talk about it to my mom at all. Some people have to. So I felt like I was in this fork in the road of kind of like trying to fill the gaps of in what circumstances we won't know about her. Because I wanted it to feel like she might be somewhere out there today. And for that to make sense, I needed to find the logic behind it. So I thought maybe she did come out of this trauma just wanting what we count as the simple things in life, just wanted her peace, wanted the family, something that while she was in the camps, she never could have imagined that she would end up having. So it's like a whole world for her. But we also we wanted those, Easter eggs of indicating that it could have gone differently. In the original script, we see her flip through a book that she wrote, just to say, like, under a pseudonym, kind of like to say she did get that aspect too, but even in that scenario, she would not be using her own name. And with her grandson, who in one line we indicate that he's gay, it was just to show what kind of a person she would grow up to be, probably. I'm hoping, you know, and again, going back to the studies, a couple of years ago, there was a study that was saying that maybe she was bisexual because they found new segments from her diary that were never released, where she talks about fantasizing about women. So I'd like to think from her writing that she would be a very open-minded person, inspired by the things that she's been through, but that she wouldn't necessarily seek the attention. She would want her like quiet corner and feel very accomplished by having that. But that's just one theory among many. And one of the points was, hopefully you leave the theater or your virtual, you know, home theater and kind of find your own version of who she would end up being if you're, you know, yeah.
No, I loved it, and I bought all of the logic of it, you know, and you were very lucky to get Tova Felcher. She's so wonderful. In my pictures here, Austin and Nate, you guys go together, don't you? In How to Plan a Heist, which, as I said, I just loved. So you played a lot with certain tropes, and I'd love to hear about the influences on you of those tropes and the ways in which, when you were sort of talking out your script or figuring out how you were going to film the script, the ways you turned those tropes on their head. I mean, to me, the last scene where the guy is marking everything on the map with kid toys is like an incredible example of that. So talk to us about that.
Well, it honestly started in the script phase. We, when I was writing it, I actually wrote in the scene headings that I called it Michael Bay mode. So I was pretty much, and when I sat down with a cinematographer, I explained that I was like, I want all of these scenes where we're planning the heist to feel like we're in like the most extreme Michael Bay movie you've ever seen. So our goal was
dark light.
Yeah, keep the camera moving as quickly as possible. You know, really dramatic lighting, even lighting that doesn't really make sense. I kind of told him to have fun with it because I knew that we could get away with it.
Yeah.
And then, you know, me and my cinematographer, we sat down and watched a lot of Michael Bay movies and scenes, and you know, picked apart like the way he would light scenes. And then for the opposite effect, when we were shooting, you know, when we kind of flash back to reality, I literally just told them, I'm like, I wanted to seem like the complete opposite, something you would see in maybe like, you know, like an average comedy or something where it's all practical light, you know, using kind of like those comedy tropes where it's almost flat, just to kind of accentuate the differences. But it wasn't just cinematography. We also tried to do it in music and even the way we mixed the audio. In the Michael Bay modes, we leaned into kind of the sound effects and the music. And then when we snapped out, we sucked all of it out. So our key was ultimately just to like make it feel like Michael Bay had full free reign and could do whatever he wanted, and make it as extreme as possible. Because I personally felt that like when making this, we couldn't kind of go halfway. We had to go full extremes on both sides in order for kind of the comedy to hit. And for the first like 45 seconds to a minute of the movie, my goal was to honestly make you think that you were watching like a heist film and not sell that it was a comedy yet.
Yeah.
So
and
on
that's
set,
exactly what it felt like, really.
yeah, on set we were trying to like, I told everyone on set, I'm like, we have to treat this as seriously as a normal heist film in order for it to sell. It can't be too jokey until we want it to be, because that's it, the comedy almost comes out of like the cinematic language that we were shooting in. So that was our goal. On the production side, I can't speak to the acting side really. Nate could probably answer that better.
Yeah, and I will be asking Nate a similar question, and yeah, that's what it felt like. I love the moment at which the lights flip on, and
Yeah.
suddenly, you know, you got reality, and there's a stroller with kids in it. I mean, it was yeah, everything. It sounds like you planned to do. I really feel that.
Sure. Yeah, and we actually did all of the light changing in camera. We did it all practically, which was really fun. And having all the lights cued, and we had like a board in which we could switch all the lights on a second's notice, and go fully from like the really extreme contrasty look to like a flat look in a matter of seconds, which was really fun to do on set.
Yeah, that's where being a writer, director, and I think you were editor too.
Yeah.
You're sort of planning all those different elements of how to get it, in the same package, as it were. That's great. So Nate, how fun was it to play the part that you played, and what was your favorite part about being in this particular comedy?
Um, any chance to work and to act, I think like any day on a set is a good day. So Austin and I had worked together on another film previously, so it was just and we're working on something else now, a feature film. So it was just more time to just kind of get to know each other in that sort of setting and just hang out. And I get to bring my kids with me and put them to work for a little bit too. Probably my favorite part is when the kids left, because um, they're divas. They're really a lot of attitude, for
For one so young?
yeah, for two actors that don't have a lot of experience or credit. They were pretty um,
Were they
demand.
asking for their own makeup people? That's what I wanted.
They want snacks. They want to touch the lights. They want to play with the very expensive equipment that, Dad had to pay for and insure, and doesn't want to go through the paperwork. My wife was on set, kind of wrangling them, and she had one of her really good friends. So it was when they were wrapped for the day, that was kind of like, all right, good, nothing's gonna break, and we can get back to other temperamental actors who are a little bit more easy to deal with because they're adults. You could at least talk to them.
And you did mention the producer aspect, so you had to produce as well. So talk to us about that.
Well, that's just a lot of LLCs and legal kind of mumbo jumbo to make sure that nobody sees us. That's
It's
really
somewhat the unfun part of the job, but very necessary, right?
Yeah, well, this time I was very adamant about not using SAG actors because I just didn't want to go through the paperwork. I find that producing, is very important and everything. It's a lot of paperwork, and I don't much care for that. So, um, not arguing, but negotiating with cinematographers over lens kits and things like that. It's always fun, and the logistics of getting things to places. But yeah, I mean, it creates its own challenge because you're kind of wearing like a business hat, and then moments later you got to go into character and you got to switch over and be, like not a problem solving kind of creative, but more of like, just an actor, like artistic creative. Sounds pretentious, but yeah, you're kind of bouncing back and forth, and then, your mind is kind of on, other stuff that it's, and not on the scene a little bit, but
yeah. What's the switching?
Luckily, we worked with a lot of really good people. So,
I'm sorry, I spoke over you. What did you just say? Luckily, what?
I said, luckily, we worked with a lot of really good people. So, there wasn't anybody that we really didn't know, that Austin and I didn't know, either together or separately. So it was kind of a good community, and that makes everything a lot easier.
Indeed. Yeah, absolutely. I'm sorry. So for Liberation Heroes, June, you mentioned this, and I said I was going to ask you to expand on it, but comment on the trend among these men and women, or at least many of them. You talked about one of them not wanting to reveal to their loved ones when they returned. It was funny, Ken said the same thing about, a grandparent or great grandparent, I can't remember which, not wanting to reveal what they saw until many years later. And then the aspect of once they did start talking, the healing effect that it appeared to have on them. Go ahead and talk a little bit about that.
Well, that's definitely, I think, a through line in so many of the testimonies that are featured in the Shoah Foundation's Visual History Archive. And as I don't know how you're saying your name. I'm sorry if I said that wrong. Said about her grandfather. I think there's a couple of things from what I've seen. I mean, this is just from what I can't really speak for the survivors and the witnesses and the liberators, but it seems that one point was that people were really not interested in hearing what they had to say. And people, life went on. Well, they experienced all this trauma, but, when they came home, people were going to movies and they were doing stuff. I mean, there was a war going on, but they didn't experience what they experienced. So I think people were living their lives and really did not want to hear, or at least they felt no one wanted to hear about it. They came back, they got married, they had their lives. So that was one. Number two, they could not face what they had seen and experienced. So the thought of talking about it was just way too traumatic.
Right.
Number three is that, they weren't ready to speak about it. Nobody wanted to hear. So, and then there were reasons that there were opportunities to speak about it in later years. People started getting older. They were having children and grandchildren who wanted to know more about their legacies. There were projects coming up about taking testimony. And then, of course, when Schindler's List came out from a survivor's perspective, that was like a whole trust factor. Like suddenly it was okay to talk about it. Of course, people had been giving testimony. There's many pioneering projects that were taking testimony before that. But for the World War II, for the veterans, you see someone who served in Patton's army, they've seen everything. But as Michael Berenbaum says in the film, they thought they saw everything, but they really, once they hadn't seen anything.
Yeah.
Because
that was exactly how he said it too. It was so perfect because he just said, you think you've seen everything and then you realize you've seen nothing. I mean, it was just, yeah.
Man's inhumanity to man. And I think the scary part is that we really thought that was behind us, but we really are seeing, having worked in this field for a long time, I always thought, oh, this could never happen again. It's happening in other places, but I'm genuinely afraid here living in the United States now. Personally, I am afraid.
Yeah. I know. Where we never were before. And now, it's funny because I took a little side journey and wrote a book, a nonfiction book about modern day Renaissance women who are just these incredible, multifaceted. I wrote about 16 women. One of them had escaped Hungary when it was Nazi occupied. She was going to be killed by a guard, and she basically said to him, "You don't want to kill me." And he said, "Why is that?" She's 14 years old. And she says, "Because I am much too young and beautiful to die." And he let her go, along with the child that she was helping to take care of. And then, of course, that actually was just the beginning of what was a very long journey. But my point is that she is Jewish, living here in the United States, having gone through that. And I don't know, Ken, if you see some of this too, but when you begin to see, intimations of some of those same things happening. She said, we were like a frog in water that you boil slowly. First they take away, your house or whatever, or your job, then they take away, then they ask you to wear a star, and so forth. And yes, not to be too political, but it's a little scary when we see these sort of intimations of similar deprivations of liberties. So any rate,
say that everything that Hitler did was legal because the laws were changed. That's
that's the real scary part.
Very scary part.
Yeah. Well, I agree. So AMR, I'm looking again who we've got. James. So I felt that the film captured not only a store, and we talked a little bit about this, but an ethos. And that ethos is the ethos of the people who worked at that store, who are quote unquote ski bums, which is a terrible term, but really they're passionate about skiing. They're artists in their own way. They're passionate about skiing. But my question to you is not only how you reflected that in the film, but how you feel that the store itself may reflect some of the ethos of Breckenridge itself. Because I'm not familiar with Breckenridge. I wish I could have been there, said Diana. But, you know, but you were. And so I was just wondering about that connection.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I basically a little bit about my background. I've done a lot of ski seasons around the world, and I've worked with many different ski shops, dealing with people on their vacations, from Italy, France, Switzerland, all throughout Europe, Canada as well. And Breckenridge, for me, as a place in general, is very special. You know, my ultimate dream is to actually live in Colorado, live in Breckenridge. So I think when I walked into AMR, the like you say, the ethos and just the way these guys are with the customers is very genuine and very, this is skiing and this is what skiing should be. And I think if you watch any one of the Warren Miller films, you'll see it's represented, you know, that style that he captured back in the day of people living out of their cars in parking lots and freezing rabbits under their cars to eat the next day in stews, you know, just living for the season. And this is, even though we're in this day and age, it's all quite modern now, this is still very, very apparent in the shop in AMR. And yeah, I mean, to the point where the guys are allowed to drink a beer in front of customers, and if customers get along with them, you know, I've seen Dave, who owns the shop. He's owned the shop now for 30 years. He will just offer a shot to customers, you know, and people, when they they come away on their vacation, sometimes they're really, really stressed, and you know, you can see that. And usually at a ski shop, this is the first point of call. They've got to get their skis ready for the next day and get up the hill. And
Right.
as soon as they come into a place like AMR, where the skiing culture is very much alive, you can see they just start to unwind quite a bit more. And it's pretty apparent. Like, I'd chase the guys around filming them, and then we'd go straight to the shop. They wouldn't even take off their ski gear. And I think there was like a bit of a bet going in the shop where they'd go back to the shop, say they got to start at 2:00, literally ski boots on still, you know, have a quick beer, and then whoever was the last or first to take their ski boots off had to shotgun a beer. So, you know, it's just a really cool sort of atmosphere in there, and I think it's something that is lost a lot when you go into corporate businesses like, you know, not to pick on them, but like Christie Sports, chain stores and things like that. I feel like it's the local shops like AMR or pups as well in town that really, really capture that, what skiing is and should be, and still hopefully is recognized to this day.
Yeah, no, you really captured all of that. It was just great. And so for you, Ariana, there again, it was such a powerful piece. And I was trying to explain it to my husband, and he said, well, is it a narrative or is it a documentary? And I said, well, if you get a chance to watch it, if there's not geo-blocked anymore, then watch it, and I'm not going to tell you. Because I think that was one of the things that worked really effectively about it, was that it starts out and you're in something. And then it's like cut, and now we're in a whole other kind of reality. So was that sort of that decision to kind of lead the audience member astray at first, and then bring in was that sort of a choice made by you all, or was it more something that kind of just happened and you went with it? What was the thinking behind structuring it that way?
Yeah, so after that day, we all kind of had a production meeting, I think the next week, and we just talked over Zoom about how we felt. We basically kind of just like debriefed as a group, and we knew that we weren't going to be able to continue production with that episode because of COVID. So school was also shut down. We wouldn't have access to gear or anything anymore. So, and it wasn't safe. So we knew we wouldn't be able to continue on finishing the episode as a narrative. So the director and I think the showrunners had the idea to turn it into a documentary, mixing it with the behind the scene footage and also with what we had got on set,
Right.
with just the regular camera. So we all kind of talked about it and decided that it would be a good idea to turn it into that, just because of everything that was going on at the time. A lot of things were coming out about police brutality, protests were going on in Denver, and then we had experienced that firsthand, and we decided that it was something we all wanted to do and that we should do, really. But I think it ultimately started with the director. I think she brought it up, and then because she had very strong feelings about everything that happened, so she wanted to make sure that everybody knew, it's happening. It's not just something that's popping up in the media because we're making something up or we want to cause problems. This is something. We were filming a narrative for a web series at a university, and these people were taking what these actresses were saying as rude and aggressive when it was actually just reality. But it was very difficult, and I think that her decision to bring that up to the group as a whole was a very good idea.
I couldn't agree more. And it's amazing that you are all students. And it was also interesting at the University of Denver, correct? University of
Colorado, Denver, yeah.
University of Colorado, Denver. And then it was really interesting. We're running out of time, but it was also interesting the views of the faculty advisors that were also interviewed, and what a shock to their system it was too, just realizing what you all were dealing with. So, we're running out of time. We could keep doing this. It's so much fun, but we are, and I don't think that we'll be able to have the question that we were going to ask a little bit about how COVID is going for you all, but I think we're all pretty aware of how COVID is going for us all. It's certainly truncating our lives, but those of us who are creatives keep finding ways to be creative, do we not? I mean, I think creatives are the people who are able to handle these things sometimes better because of that. So with that, I'm going to need to say goodbye to everyone, but I will underline that we have each other's email addresses, because those were all sent out, by breakfast. And so we should, stay in touch, and also make sure to watch each other's films. I really highly recommend that. And then you can give each other comments, personal comments to each other about their films. Now that you've talked to everyone and gotten to know everyone, I think that'll be even better. So I really encourage you to do that. And if I were there, I would get to talk to you all personally and see you at the parties and all of that, but no. So I'll just say goodbye, and thank you again to Diana and to Breakfast, and to Janice, who I think we've lost.
Yeah, and I just want to say on behalf of Breck Film Fest, thank you guys so much for taking time out of your busy schedules to talk, to each other and to us, and we're gonna record this and put it up there so people can see it, and we just really appreciate you, love you so much, and keep on doing what you're doing. Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye, everyone.
Goodbye.